Dev TFT into the Arcane learnings. Once a set, at the very end, they do a reflection on all the good and the bad of TFT. So let's go ahead and read and give our thoughts. It's written by Riot, Mort, Xtina, and a few other teammates. Posted today. Welcome back to our once a set conversation where we reflect on our favorites, our not so favorites, our successes, hiccups, and everything in between. These articles are always deep, and since we're making 3 sets a year, we're now using them to discuss just how we're thinking about sets and TFT on a longer timeline. TFT is pretty big now too, so we're going to be calling some friends from across the team to help us make this piece a bit more holistic. Okay, let's turn on that rainy lo-fi and get reading. TLDR, we're going to dive deep into our Arcane learnings on the following topics. How did Arcane land as a set? Arcane is a high-stakes, gritty, and character-driven epic. ... TFT has a penguin with a wooden sword. So how did we merge the two and how did it go? Well, it depends on how much you like Smeech and Savika, but also depends on how much you enjoyed Loris and Steb. Shipping alongside the show also meant a shortened PvP cycle leading to balance not being as tight as we wanted and bugs that slipped through the cracks. Okay. Evolving the set with 6 costs. Shipping our release version of the set without 6 costs felt incomplete, but our staggered approach just made the most sense. Anomaly and champion elevation mechanics. The anomaly was a pretty successful mechanic. Especially after we saw some of his initial issues, we had a ton of fun of pushing champion fantasies further in novel ways, and this is the space we eliminated. This is a space we intend to explore in the future, but not with our next set. Okay. And by the way, this actually said that like 6 costs was always going to be part of the set. It was either the beginning or in the middle. Augment design. We have several small learnings in the augment space from new ways to make high-stakes augments to learnings around champion augments. Okay. Opening counters. There are clear trade-offs with these having versus portals, but the pros continue to be worth their use. That being said, we have learned about what makes a good and bad opening encounter. All right. I look forward to that. Chem Baron was our first high-stakes trait that directly empowered the units of the trait after the cash out. And that was an important exploration for us. We learned a lot here. Some good, some less so. But we're going to shift to a different style of cash out trait for our next set. Okay, cash out traits are back. Form Swapper was our most successful multiple choice trait, but it taught us a valuable lesson about perceptions, options, and the rounding up issue. Okay? I don't know what the rounding up issue is. Form Swapper is one of my favorite traits of the set. Because of how much HP melee carries gain when they star up, the difference between a 2-star and a 3-star melee champ is quite large, as they benefit from the HP and the AD growth. We have a solution for this, but it's going to take a while before we can bring it to live. I didn't even realize that this was an issue that they identified. Tanks and durability. Tanks have 4 different types of abilities, and ones that grant durability perform the worst. We're going to have to add more levers to durability tanks in the future and find alternative hookups that keep them viable throughout the fight. Talking about Leona and Nunu. Festival of Beast revivals. Modernizing Festival of Beast had its challenges. We'll dive into some of them here. All right, so we got a lot to unpack. How did Arcane land as a set? Arcane is high stakes, gritty, and character-driven epic. TFT is penguin with the wooden sword. Creating a TFT set that bridged our favorite game with our favorite show meant crafting a set darker and bolder and more intense than anything we've done before. And while we paid homage to Piltover and Zon with our 6 sets, gizmos and gadgets, Into the Arcane was an entirely different beast. It was designed with the lofty goal of letting players relive and rewrite Arcane in their own way. ... In the convergence. So, how do we pull it off and how do we think it landed? First, we build a roster. Into the Arcane's lineup was split 3 ways. 1/3 Arcane characters, 1/3 Piltover and Zon, and 1/3 Runeterra's finest to balance trait webs and gameplay variety. This let Arcane fans who are new to TFT instantly build their Enforcer squad, experiment with the perils of Shimmer through Chem Baron, or chase those ultra-powerful 6 costs. Meanwhile, longtime TFT fans can still run it back with the Conquerors of Noxus or their favorite emissaries from across Runeterra. But while this structure catered to both Arcane fans and seasoned TFT players, committing to 10 brand new champions was no small feat. That's actually true. They did release 10 champions that don't exist in Summoner's Rift. And you might say like, well, Powder and Violet are like other variations of it. It's still like new models and new animations and everything. So they swung really big. They swung really, really big. Making 10 new characters was an exciting undertaking, but also a major lift for our team. And some of our new units may fallen short for our less Arcane-driven players. For every Loris instead we added, we missed a chance to include a Yasuo, a Syndra, or another beloved League champion. New faces like Loris and Steb simply didn't have the depth to inspire the same level of fandom fervor. That said, we did see some big wins. Units like Savika and Smeech were instant favorites. It's true. Part of it is also because I feel like Arcane They just basically took characters from the first episode. Like these were or I guess Scar wasn't really a first episode, but like it feels as if they could have introduced better Arcane characters than like some of these other ones. Like Loris and Stab are like, I guess they're part of the Enforcer squad, so that's part of it, but it did feel like there were even cooler characters that were left off of Arcane. So I agree with that. Beyond units, we had Arcane. Like for example, they could have done Mbessa. What's the name of the right hand man for Mbessa? The dude who was like challenging. He died. Sorry, spoiler. But like, what was the name of the dude who was like Mbessa's right hand man? Rictus. Yes, that guy was cool. They could have put him in some ways as a conquer unit, and that would have been also badass. But whatever. I digress. Beyond units, we had an arcane-driven mechanic, which would have his own section for now. But we'll just hit on his theme. In the current state of TFT, we see set mechanics as a smaller scope pieces that drive the theme and make each set feel distinct set-y. But if that doesn't make sense, let's apply this logic into Arcane real quick. The anomaly wasn't meant to be a colossal game changer. It showed up on 4-6 to empower a single champion in a unique way. It was just one piece of the set's identity alongside an augment refresh in an entirely new roster. The anomaly wasn't about flipping the meta. It was about injecting Arcane's defining moments into TFT. It's true. What happens if you send Echo into the anomaly and he comes back not just with a deeper understanding of Jinx, phrasing, but also laser eyes? Now that's deep, that's peak TFT wackiness, but it's also Arcane. The release of Arcane was a huge moment across all of Riot, not just TFT. So our plans had to be synchronized to the hilt. This created complexities, of course. In a way, we were able to ship the set and talk about ahead of its release, as well as a shortened PB cycle, which made day one balance even tougher and had some bugs slipping through the cracks. That is true. This set had a ton of bugs. But this release timing also led to some really cool moments, including releasing our 6 costs as they revealed in Arcane. Really cool. As episode drops, the set continued to evolve, which is our way of bringing Arcane to TFT players in the most authentic way possible. All right. So there's a few things to break down here. The first is that they are confirming that they don't want the set mechanic to have that big of an impact. And they want TFT to feel like the new set is more than just a mechanic, but it's the totality of it, right? They have augment refresh, they have a new roster, and they don't want the set mechanic to drive everything. And that's, I think, a big W. Because in the past, the set mechanic warped everything because of how impactful it was. Think about as recent as set 11, encounters. When encounters drove so much of the gameplay that it felt like you were just in the craziest taxi driver of all time. And if you got thrown out of the taxi on the way to your destination, it did not matter. It was just so much whiplash and jerking left and right as you were like getting like, here's a carousel with all artifacts or rating items. And then by the way, here's like another encounter where everyone gets 1,000,000 gold. And then also here's some duplicators. It's just like, it just got way too crazy. Encounters were just a bunch of nonsense. And so now, and then you can also have that across like a bunch of other mechanics such as legends or dragons. Anyways, I like that they toned it down. I think that's a big W. I hope they continue to do that. And also, I still felt like the set mechanic did contribute to the theme. I think a lot of the flavor around it, evolving the champion, dropping 6 costs in the middle does make sense. I hope they're going to talk about 6 costs though, right? Yeah, okay. So they're actually going to talk about 6 costs because that's where a big source of complaints for this set. Also, the reason why they had to have a shortened PB cycle was because of Arcane the show as well. And so that's another thing that is a trade-off. People love that TFT can be a marketing vehicle for some of these other properties, and that's actually a really powerful position for TFT to be at Riot. If Riot wants to advertise anything else in the future for League of Legends, or let's say Valorant or something else, TFT can be at that forefront as well. It's like a playground for Riot. But the issue is when you sync it up with that product, that's going to create things like this. Shortened PB cycle. I think they had to push it 1 week earlier because of Arcane. And that just gives them less times to have quality, and that also creates some bad scenarios. So, all right, evolve sets, 6 costs. That's our next subject here. Tone it down until there's no fun allowed in the set. That's not what they're saying. They're saying they don't want it to be as... Listen, it's not like a 1 or 11 setting. You can still have a mechanic that feels good and impactful without it warping everything. Like there's definitely a boundary of where variance and wackiness should subside. You shouldn't actually go over the board because then it just ruins the fun. Everything in moderation, right? Okay, well, we couldn't reveal Mel's super cool magical powers before Act 3 even aired, could we? That is true. We always planned to include high impact 6 costs in Into the Arcane. Their characters were just too impactful not to, but timing was everything. Launching an evolved version of the set would bring our vision to completion, but it also meant shipping an initial version of the set that, let's be real, felt incomplete. True. I can't even count how many times we heard, where's Victor? Where's Warwick? And we loved the player theories like, I bet they'll swap out Malzahar for Warwick. That's actually true. I saw that theory a lot, which honestly made a lot of sense. But in the end, our staggered approach just made the most sense. We also had the choice to let anyone access 6 costs, regardless of player level, once the anomaly appeared, or in Victor's case, a bit earlier. This meant that every player, whether they preferred power leveling or reroll strategies, had a fair shot in these game-defining units. It also ensured reroll comps didn't get left in the dust just because 6 costs broke the power ceiling, board-wide stun, elimination prevention, or a very scary dog. Except for Release Warwick. Release Warwick was kind of a joke. But this approach had trade-offs. Aside from level 10 or hoarding gold, there was no real agency in finding a 6 cost. It was just luck. The 4 truest words that has ever been issued. And while this rush felt amazing when you hit, it also meant feels bad moments when your opponents rolled the game-changing 6 cost right after the anomaly appeared. Ultimately, we landed this approach as the least problematic. Man, if this was the least problematic, I wonder what other problematic solutions they had on the table. It kept 6 costs accessible without forcing every player into a power leveling arms race. That is true. It feels stupid if 6 costs was the only thing you could do was rush levels. You would never had a incentive to reroll. But then that might bring the ultimate question, why even do 6 costs? Now let's talk about power balance. Our goal was simple. When a 6 cost showed up in your shop, you want to same on your board, even at the cost of trade synergy. They needed to be strong, flexible, and viable without any items. Lofty goals? Sure. Did we nail it? Not quite. Wow. Very on the nose. On release, 6 costs had too much utility. We overcompensated thinking they needed extra versatility since they didn't contribute to traits. Instead, we saw players picking them purely for their effects. Victor for her Shred, Thunder, and Stun. Mel just to trigger her Banished Mage passive before selling her. Not ideal. We've since fine-tuned them. Patch 13.6 about to drop with what we hope is the final tweak. Okay, so the Road Dog wrote this like a couple weeks ago. But it took longer than we'd like. You know, one thing not mentioned was that Warwick was also useless, relatively speaking. Like, Warwick is probably not bad in general, but compared to Victor and Mel, he was like a 4 cost, it felt like. We learned a ton from these champions. Before launch, we worried a board-wide stun might be unbalanceable, but once Victor released, we realized that wasn't even the scariest part of his kit. In fact, after removing his Shred and Thunder, we had to buff him multiple times. Warwick, meanwhile, taught us some hard lessons about stat-loaded melee carries, but that's a story for another section. Oh, is that it? That's it on 6 costs. Okay, well, basically, I think they basically said, okay, did we nail it? Not quite. And I think that's basically what they came to the conclusion was. Here are some things we learned about it, but in the end, they didn't really land where they wanted it to. But at least they got 6 costs power level rise in a much more reasonable spot than it was at the very beginning. But still, I think if they do bring back 6 costs, I hope they don't gate it through the way they're doing it now. It feels bad. I don't think, but the thing is, I feel like they don't have to have 6 costs be something for like level 10 only either. But I think the 6 costs could exist. Like, for example, in the past, believe it or not, 6 costs actually did exist in TFT in the form of dragons. But before even dragons came around, in set 2, there was a 7 cost called Lux. And Lux was basically the same value as a legendary. But your legendary slot could, instead of being, at the time it was like Singed was a 5 cost, for example. Instead of being Singed, it could be Lux. And it would be like a random trait of Lux. And I don't think people hated that. I mean, it was kind of dumb. When the reason why Lux was kind of silly was because she would give you +2 of a trait. So if it was like, if you're playing in this case like Rebels, you could hit like a Rebel Lux, but the next time you roll that Lux, it could be an Enforcer Lux, and the next time you roll that, it could be a Conqueror Lux. So every Lux was different, and so there's a lot of like variance with that. But I think a lot of people enjoyed the element of being able to access that randomly, and I feel like that would have already been a better version of 6 costs. But then they toned down the power to make sure it's not as insane, so on and so forth. I'm sure like implementing different systems could have probably been better, But I think the playing of this 6-cost power level felt fun. It felt cool that they were flexible, and they were definitely like pretty exciting moments if you hit them. I can't disagree with that. Anomaly and champion elevations. That's gonna be the next one. We didn't know any better in set 2. Is that it? We were just basically ignorant towards variance. There were other things to complain about in set 2. Do you guys think that that would be a bad system as well? I mean, I'm just telling you that they had different mechanics in it. If they do bring back 6 costs, they could do other things. Our goal with set mechanics have changed in the past few sets. Let's call this time period the post-augments era. TFT is already a complicated game, so since Gizmos and Gadgets, we've been keeping mechanics smaller in scope and more tied to the thematic. Within this paradigm, the anomalies are pretty successful set mechanic, especially after the first few patches where we fine-tuned the distribution rules and added a few more interesting options. On release, you were able to handpick the anomaly you wanted, which had a few pros in enabling compositions that can only exist in a specific anomaly, such as Ergot eating set was undeniably exciting. But the cons were significant, as players could force specific anomalies and thus comps that were believed to be strong over and over again, reducing game variance. It's worth noting that some players really liked being able to hand select a specific anomaly. A lot of players actually did. There will always be a subset of players that want less variance. But for most of our players, most of the time, the opposite is true. They have a clip. They would just roll for ultimate hero. Wait, what? We're going Dragon Soul on Vi? Is this more dog rolling? Freestyling. I see. Whis. I think it's just in the demonstration to show the mechanic. So as we do when we see a way making TFT more fun, we acted fast. Our first change for the anomaly created a cap of 12 rolls before you could see the repeats, after which rolls would be truly random, which created a new problem. When outcomes are truly random, there's an equal chance for each option to appear at any given time, including the option you just rolled past. It's true. How many times did you roll past Repulsor only to be offered Repulsor in a few more shops after that? This is a tough reality of statistics, but effectively, each anomaly was a number on a 66-sided die, so when you rolled a 3, which was kill streak, then you had the same probability to roll it again as you have any other specific anomaly. So while the math here was correct... Sorry, let me actually reread that. So, while the math here was correct, because you could hear that tone, I could hear this in Mort's voice. We needed to add an invisible rule to make sure it wasn't truly random. That rule came another patch later, which prevented you from seeing the same anomaly more than once within 12 rolls. Probability and math are foundational to the game design, but another vital piece we took away from anomaly, which was ones resonated with most players, aka which anomalies were the most fun. Even when at a balanced state, our most picked anomalies offered broad, universally useful power rather than niche applications. Those things were like Infectious Anomaly, the Finisher, and Giant Size. It's because people have it's also the visual of it too. The visual of Infectious Anomaly is really cool, and you can get a tangible feeling of power. Giant Size is the same way. When you enlarge a champion, right, you make Giant Test Vi, it makes it feel more powerful. If anything, I think one thing, I talked about this as well, I think TFT struggles a lot with tactile response to making you feel like you made an impactful, powerful decision. Outside of just like 3-starring your champion and like watching your unit deal 10,000 damage a fight. And I think Infectious Anomaly and Giant Size, part of the reason why they're so powerful is because you can just see how you scale and it makes it feel a lot better. It's like a visual response to that, versus if you like give your champion 20 damage amp, you're like, okay, I don't really get, or like 20 durability, you just like look at it, talk about things about invisibility. Also, the other thing that I want to say is that the worst part about all this is that these are like hidden rules and it's things that like you just never really knew until either Riot was to tell us or you had to figure it out on your own. There's like a 12 roll cap, but like there's these kinds of complex hidden mechanics I think I'm just not a fan of. And they also do take away some of the fun. Like the inability to actually roll for a specific anomaly does take away some of the fun. So like when you combine all those things, I think in the end it was a little bit ham-fisted, the way that we had to like make anomalies like random and you had to just kind of like, you know, pick and choose one of these like mid options versus like, because you couldn't really roll for a good one in a lot of cases and you have to hope that you high roll one. So that part feels bad. But I will say that I do think that the change was necessary, because if we played this whole set while hard forcing an anomaly, what would have happened is people would just basically be like, well, I'm playing family reroll. In this game, I spent 20 gold to get ultimate hero. And then the next game, I rolled 40 gold to get ultimate hero, right? And that kind of game variance is not very fun as well. Oh, there's also tailing rules as well. That's right. There's something that actually we still don't know to this day, but apparently anomalies are tailored-ish to your board. And no one knows exactly the rules, because I think Riot keeps that intentionally hidden. I think that's like fine-ish, like, because that also exists for everything in TFT, and it's not Riot's job to tell you how to optimize everything. But if you have so many hidden rules of like how things work, it definitely is going to naturally lead to some points of frustration for some players. All right, these anomalies were popular because of general use cases, but also because of their simplistic nature. This is an important reminder for us that we have straightforward outputs that prevent an increase in dizziness or are more broadly applicable to a variety of comps. But we and you all also learn another thing that starkly contrasts to the above point, and that's the way information spreads. Wait, learn another thing that starkly contrasts the way information spreads? What does that mean? All right, one last thing about the anomaly, and then I promise we'll move on. The anomaly was a fresh way to push a champion's power fantasy beyond just being a 3-item carry, whether that be pulling enemies towards them with deep roots or firing an endless laser at the target with laser eyes. Even Center of the Universe Twitch example above turned a champion's power fantasy into something even more fantastic. This is a fascinating space, and we fully intend to revisit in the future, but not in our very next step. Stop trying to keep the tech to yourself. What do you mean? I literally made a website to dump every piece of tech that I could possibly know, and it's updated on a daily basis. The set is over, and you're seeing this changes. This was yesterday's changes. Me and Disrupt sat down, and we yapped about it for a long time. I have no tech to hide. I have no tech to hide. I stream scrims. I don't even know what to do. If you can't climb, that is a skill issue. I just want to say it for the record. I have nothing to hide. It's all you. All right, augment design. There are several small learnings we've taken from our latest batch of augments. They're all pretty niche, so we're going to move through them pretty quickly. Expected Unexpected versus Call to Chaos. When we diluted the exciting and random power of Call to Chaos into 3 smaller events, none of those felt very good, and the augment felt less satisfying. That is true. I agree. We still like the augment, but this example reinforces that random highs are better a sharp, singular moment than drip releases. Okay, fair. Expected Unexpectedness. That's the one where you roll a dice at the beginning of stage 2, 3, 4. And basically the way they viewed it is you split Call to Chaos over the course of 3 stages. It doesn't feel that good. In fact, it's kind of laughable. Silver Champion Augments. During Magic and Mayhem, we had difficulty balancing our 1-cost champion augments at the gold augment power level soul, as they were strong enough to either scale into the late game, not entirely what we want from a 1-cost, or a complete bait. By placing them into the silver tier, we were better able to balance them, allowing them to have the appropriate power level more often, while creating some very fun experience with Trolling, Mad Chemist, and Blade Dance, all creating exciting and unique comp. Agreed. I actually think that it was really funny that Trolling, Mad Chemist, and Blade Dance, they've never been that problematic, and they were really fun. And I think that these are examples of good versions of hero augments. I've had hype games and funny games of all of them. My favorite moment this set actually probably has to do with the hero augment. Was that Mad Chemist, where Cinch turns into the running man with book. He had like this AP scaling, hit a radiant item, and I took an anomaly, Laser Eyes, which is you shoot a beam based off your AP, and then you burn your opponent. And so I actually had Laser Eyes on Sin just run around and Laser Eye beam everything down. It was the funniest thing I've seen in quite some time. And I actually almost won the game. I got second in that game. But that was probably my favorite moment this set. Golemify and Dumbify. These are just fresh takes on high-stakes augments that are worth calling out as a great continuations in the space. High-stakes augments that may have been a big part of Magic and Mayhem, but many of them are fun enough to inspire further iterations. We'll continue to explore the space, but don't worry, Econ trait players, there'll certainly be a trait or two for you. By the way, they're nerfing Golemify and Dumbify, and I think it's because of me. I basically said that it's more viable because you buffed them way too much and you gave them the stage scaling, and more dogs like, yeah, watch me take that away and they'll still be good. So we'll see. Team up augments. These successfully allowed relationships from Arcane that weren't viable boards due to our trait webs to exist. And that was cool because Into the Arcane was partially about just doing that. But while these fantasies they provided was great, the power and gameplay excitement of these augments was diluted. A lot of their power had to be in the units being accessed early, not leaving much room for the effect to contribute. Augments like Unlikely Duo, Savika and Jinx, and Martial Law, Martial Law, Caitlyn and Bessa, all provided very powerful units, often before you could access these 5 costs reliably. So much of the combat power was instead sort of an economic power of just getting the champions early. Martial Law. It's true. A lot of the times you would take these augments because they gave you access to the 5 costs you needed. Unlikely Duo gave you Jinx or Savika, and Martial Law gave you Caitlyn. Martial Law. It's true. I also do think that this team up augments, I was worried that it would be too powerful because on PB they were like super insane. They would spike your board like crazy as well. And I thought they were going to be a balanced nightmare. And to be fair, I don't think they were a balanced nightmare for being too powerful. I just think that you pretty much took them because they gave you a 5 cost. That was guaranteed. 6 cost augments. These all ended up undertuned as they had to be balanced around the ceiling they could provide. That ceiling being a 6 cost can put you on the anomaly to create a monstrous unit. So if you ever got to play Warwick plus power consumption to make Giant Warwick or another powerful carry anomaly, then you know just how devastating these could be. But for most players, most of the time, they didn't quite hit the mark. It's true. They actually buffed it this patch so that now you only have to win 2 fights with Warwick or upgrade 4 units. But that was still not that impressive of an augment. So I agree. Opening encounters. Because that's it for augment design. I mean, overall, I would say augments this set, I would give like a solid B. There were some really fun ones. I think Golemify and Dumbify are pretty funny. I actually think the Silver Champion augments were pretty good. But some of the other ones fell kind of flat. So I would say a B. Opening encounters are still something we have active discussions about because they're clearly trading or there's clear trade-offs with them, and because there's something we're seeing come up often within the community. Having opening encounters instead of portals where you vote on an opening encounter option continues to hit our goal of lowering the complexity barriers and avoiding the occasional antisocial consequence of the voting process. I see. They actually don't like one-guying. So we're going to continue forward with opening encounters. But we have learned a lot about opening encounters this set. Okay. I'm okay with them keeping it as long as opening encounters are toned down. Early on, we had no opening encounter occur far too frequently under the idea that players liked the more vanilla TFT experience. But that quickly got old. So we end up going from 40% no opening encounter in our early play test events to 20% no opening encounter on PB. All the way down to 10% by the time we hit live. It's true, you guys. It's true. You know who was complaining? I need to call them out. Do you know who's complaining about no opening encounters? It was the challenger players. It was the challenger player. I feel like I need to bring up the receipts because these are the same challenging players that complain about encounters all the time. No encounter game. I don't know, but this no encounter thing is not it. Yeah, I agree. No encounter should be 3, 1 cost. Remove no encounter. No encounter theme seems turbo high down to reduce variant. Okay, Kerm was the only person that was down from the no encounter thing. And Dissoap. Dissoap was the only other person. So Kerm and Dissoap were like, yeah, down for no encounters. But then the other people were like, it's so bedge. It's so bedge. We also learned that opening encounters that dramatically shift the core way you should play TFT should probably not exist in most cases. Here we're referring to Warwick's Hunger, which shifted the tempo of the lobby too significantly. It's true. To an extent, the Mbessa Wandering Golem counter does this too, but it's something that players and ourselves overwhelmingly love, so we'll make an exception and revisit the opening counter if it falls out of favor with you all. Yeah. Okay, so Mbessa Golems are sticking around. They love it. You guys heard it. You guys love it too much. You overwhelmingly love it. You overwhelmingly love it. People love trainer golems. I think they do, actually. I think people love it. Who loves Mbessas? I think people who generally play TFT on a non-professional level actually like it a lot. Believe it or not, it's actually one of the... Okay, hold on a second. You guys can't be saying... My chat cannot be saying this. How many times... Okay, this is the worst part about augment stats going away. How many times on my EU climb to challenger did we pick wandering trainer and other things like that on our way up? I wish they could show you your augment picks. But the amount of times you guys clicked on things like wandering trainer because you think it's fun, you guys all voted. We got to choose it though. I mean, that's true. But part of it is that you guys love it. You guys overwhelmingly love it. I want Ambessa every game. Yeah, okay, well, I don't want every game. That could be a game mode, I guess. That's because we're watching, it's not playing, it's not our LP. Yeah, exactly. Players love it. It's fun. It's fun. Chem Baron was our first high-stakes trait that directly empowered the units of the trait after the cash out. That was a cool space to explore, especially given how many exciting Chem Baron carries there were to play. How many exciting Chem Baron carries there were to play? Oh, Smeech, Renata. I mean, Renata really that exciting? She had a pistol and she shielded everybody. But what plagued Chem Baron during the Arcane was the thresholdy balance issues it had. On release, the trait was especially weak, with his items not giving enough power upon cash out and the recipe for accessing powerful loot being too hard. Emblem and the 3 costs early. We ended up overcorrecting for our competitive players during the middle of the set, and it wasn't until patch 13.5 where we made structural changes to the trait to eliminate the power ceiling, while also making it more consistent to hop into, requiring hitting one of the 3 costs early instead of an emblem and a 3 cost. This change was in the right direction, as it allowed us to better balance the trait for our most competitive players by placing new controls on how powerful Chem Baron players could get. But it did result in the trait landing weaker than we hoped post-rework. Yep, but Mortdog wrote this before they buffed it, and now Chem Baron is way too strong. And it might actually be determining who goes to Worlds, or sorry, specifically who wins Worlds. I expect Chem Baron to be a terror this weekend. Finally, let's talk about cash out rewards. Getting one super legal Chem Baron item was novel, but it just wasn't flashy enough compared to the likes of Fortune, which offers a bunch of random and cool stuff. While we're going to take a break from the style of high stakes trait with our next set. Whoa, we're taking a break from high stakes trait with our next set. Uh-oh. China's going to hate that. We should continue to make interesting cash out traits to see what works and what's worth innovating in. Sugarcraft, High Stakes Augment, Chem Baron, they're all explorations in the space that have been loved by some, or just a few. And next time we're going to try another style of cash out trait, this one geared towards one high moment that'll require some big brain pivots. Oh, China's definitely going to hate that. Overall, I give Chem Baron like a C. C for Chem Baron, I guess. I think that this trait fell really flat. To me, it wasn't the worst cash out mechanic. The worst cash out mechanic, actually, what even was the worst cash out mechanic? I guess Draconic was D, but the cash out mechanic for Chem Baron, it's not like that bad. I do like the idea of the save the shimmer and move on. I think those are pretty fun to just like push one more. And I do think that where Chem Baron landed was starting to become fine because you could play around visionaries and ambushers and maybe around the cash out itself. But I do think that it's kind of, it was a problem to balance. And also it was too optimal for too long to just play all the Chem Baron units and just play like around whatever item you got. And that felt really flat to me, really static. I didn't like it that much. And I think they missed on this. Also, I do think that Chem Baron also is not that satisfying if you are a low-end player, because Chem Baron, I actually didn't really understand this that much until I played I played it in low elo myself. But Chem Baron is like impossible to play at lower elo, not because of necessarily just a skill issue, but because you cannot actually loose streak. Some people just literally don't know how to play boards at all. And you could just be literally playing one Silco, one Smeech, one Rennie, one Renata, one Singed, and the other people are just like playing like Vex 1, Irelia, and sets, and they're not even trying to grief you. They just don't know how to build a better board. And at low elo, you just get constantly griefed. So I think balancing Chem Baron is really hard for Riot because the stats on it look terrible. Like they always look terrible. And they always will look terrible. And so they buffed it this patch, and that was a pretty big mistake for Worlds. So it's unfortunate, and I think Mortdog even called it out in his patch rundown, but it is what it is. All right, Form Swapper was an exciting trait on paper that required a lot of extra work since we had made 2 versions of each champion. But was it successful? Kind of. Success here would be each champion played in each form during clear comp building moments, at least as a backline carry in a vertical bruisers comp. But even when we had balance on both forms as close as it gets, the perception was, for each form swapper, there was a correct and incorrect placement. At least in the front line, almost no matter what. This may, in part, be social, but the reality is when one form is 51% successful, while the other is 49%. The perception is one form is always better than the other. I don't know if I agree with that conclusion, because I think Swain is a good example of how they split it down the middle. Now, Form Swapper was our most successful multiple choice trait, looking back to things like Story Weird from Inkborn Fables or Sona from Remix Rumble. Oh, okay, right, because I was confusing it with frontline backline, but they're talking about just like choosing options. We saw both forms of Swain and Jace often, but at least in Gangplank, often we're seen just in one form or the other. That's true. Looking forward, we're always going to have to deal with the rounding up issue with these types of traits, but the challenge they present is enticing enough to keep chasing. I mean, I like Form Swappers a lot. I think that they're one of the coolest things of the set. I love how unusual it is. Even right now, it's cool to see Elise as a backline. I think this patch, actually, it's funny that he wrote it, because if he wrote it after this patch, I think this patch, he would basically say Gangplank was the only miss. Because right now, a lot of people are playing backline Elise in scrims and doing well. They're playing them both temporarily as an item holder, or they're playing her as an endgame carry, and there's a mix of front and back. So I would say that if he wrote this literally like 2 weeks later, he would just be like, this was actually really good, and the only unit that we kind of missed on was Gangplank, but Jace, Elise, and Swain all saw their spots as front and back, and I think that's a good thing. Also, a very gratuitous picture of Elise. I never realized that she has a good sense of fashion. Melee champion power scaling. This one's a bit mathy, but pretty simple. Melee champs mostly survive by taking damage, gaining mana from that damage, then casting their ability. Because of how much HP they gain when they start up, the difference between a 2-star and a 3-star melee champ is quite large, as they benefit from the HP and the AD growth. This is especially an issue because melee carry success is gated around their ability to survive, meaning they need those stats to succeed. But when they succeed, they serve both as a carry and a tank. This key examples from the set that had the star-based thresholds were Smeech, Violet 3-star, and Urgot. And even Warwick, who as a 6 cost had the stats of a 2-star 4 cost. Warwick, who has 6 cost, had the stats of a 2-star 4 cost. Long term, we're going to have a solution for this problem on the systems level, but it's going to need a bit more time. So it's interesting because Digital and I actually talked about this on our latest podcast, where melee champions basically have some of the best scaling, and they function. I mean, that's part of the reason why they're really good with these claws, because they function both as a carry and a tank at times. But they also have an awkward role in a lot of fights if you don't itemize them or if you don't upgrade them. And so they're very important. And I think also this is why tank anomalies were so good on Echo and Vi and other like melee units, because they bounce those to be for large HP pools, but when you give like a bunch of Omnivamp and other combat stats, what ends up happening is that these units end up becoming your tank. So like Vi in Enforcers with Bulwark or Stone Skin is your tank and your carry, and you don't even need Loris anymore. So that's like part of the reason why those anomalies end up being so good. Tanks and durability. Tanks have 4 different types of spells: self-heal, crowd control, self-shield, or gain durability, or armor/MR. Of these 4 types, gain durability is consistently the weakest because by the time you cast, you've lost a lot of your HP, making the newly added durability less effective. When Leona casts her ability at 100 HP, that 100 HP just becomes 150 effective HP. But when a tank like Blitzcrank gains a 450 shield at 100 HP, well, that's just 550 HP. So that is true. That's assuming you don't have durability at the beginning of the fight. But he's saying as an ability, right? Yeah, he's talking about a type of spell. While Leona and Nunu were the key offenders here, there was one exception to this rule. Singe was able to find success with damage reduction due to the extra HP bars his BFF Renata Glass was throwing out. Don't tell him those shields were for everyone. So looking ahead at our tank class, we're going to need to pay special attention to tanks that gain armor and MR or damage reduction to make sure they have ways to activate that early, or alternative hooks that keep them viable throughout the fight. I mean, I think another part of it was that Singe gave so much attack speed. Singe also gave so much DPS to your best carry that that was also another element of it as well. All right, Festival of Beasts Revival. And by the way, they're right, because they didn't talk about Nunu as well. Nunu was ended up being kind of embarrassing. Hey folks, Riot Xtina here, the product manager behind Revivals and a bunch of other stuff. We shipped another Revival during the Into the Arcane. And this one was huge as it brought a fan favorite set into the modern era of TFT. The Festival of Beasts Revival was our 3rd Revival, and the performance blew us away. The Revival peaked at just under half of total TFT hours globally. But just because there were a ton of play hours doesn't mean there weren't things to improve. Ahem, Timo Sag. Wait, holy cow. Half of TFT hours globally. That's crazy. They're basically saying that it doubled the time of TFT gameplay. Modernizing Festival of Beasts had its challenges. How do we preserve the spirit of the original champion design without making the experience oppressively unfun for players? Players can no longer craft items like Zephyr or Trap Claw to counter abilities and traits as they could when the original set was live. Shout out to our old school TFT knowers. It's true. Trap Claw was Guard Breaker. Guard Breaker now gives you bonus damage if you hit a shielded unit. Trap Claw gave you a shield for the holder and the one unit on the left and right that would block one form of CC. And so it would stop a bunch of people like, you know, doing hooks or doing stuns for the back line. But as a result, it didn't give any offensive stats. So it was a purely defensive utility item. Admittedly, we struggle a bit with combat pacing and Revival Festival of Beasts, but we shipped large patches after its initial release to somewhat course correct here. Expect us to continue to try to defend best to find that balance between the fun of playing ridiculous units from past sets and the modern principles that makes TFT the game we love today. You got okay, so they're like kind of brushing past this, but set 4 Revival, I lost a lot of enthusiasm when I realized that it was just basically a spirit fest. Like you just basically play spirit. I actually haven't checked the stats of it on this patch, but it was just like everyone was playing spirit. And you know what was crazy about Zed? Zed's ability when he attacks 3 times steals AD from the champion, but that used to be flat AD. So he used to steal like 25 AD, but now, or 30 AD, but now he scales 30% AD. And as you guys know, percent tends to scale exponentially. So there was times where Zed with Rageblade would literally have, I'm not even exaggerating, 2000 AD. Like, as in, like, you looked at the tooltip and it said that he had like 2000 AD, and every time you attack, he would just one tap everything. Because he was scaling 30% on top of 30% on top of 30% on top of 30%, which was just like, what? So they adjusted straight up systems in TFT that didn't actually apply very well to set 4. So yeah, set 4 was a balance. Set 4.5 Revival was very imbalanced. Personal bags or personal champion pools were another change we tried this time around, one that lead into play what you want to have a good time aspect of the Revival. We're not quite sure if we'll be keeping these for next Revival, but that decision will be made soon as we wrap collecting feedback from the mode. Regardless if you loved or hated him or didn't care, let us know what you think. So personal bag sizes are that, you know how in TFT you have a bag size that you share with everybody. There's only 10 forecasts in the pool, so if someone's holding 3 forecasts, it's impossible to 3-star it. But in this format, in Revival, you had your own bag size, and I think it was like 15, 12, like 11, 10, 9, or something like that. So something like that, where like basically there was a smaller bag size, but it was only your bag, so everybody in the game could reroll Yasuo if they wanted to. And I think it ended up being kind of bad, like quite bad, because that just means everyone just played whatever they thought was the strongest comp, and it like dramatically reduced diversity down. It wasn't very fun, I think. But I do think that solved the other issue, because they've always had a big back size. Because the other thing they did for Revival in the past was that they had 50 copies of every champion, so basically everyone could hit. And what that ended up doing was the optimal strategy for Revival was to take triple econ and then roll for 3-star 4 cost or 5 cost every time. And that's what happened with the set 5.5 Revival. Like everyone was supposed to just like take triple econ and roll for 3-star 4 cost or 3-star 5 cost, because there's no bag size to stop them. And there's like too many copies of it. For Revival, it's okay. Yeah, agreed. I hope they never shipped alive. Okay, the last part of Revivals I want to talk about is the Revival Ladder, which is a more progression-focused competitive system that allows players to embrace the relaxed, for-fun nature of Revivals, but still rewards those who wish to climb. In the Festival of Beasts, we added a new leaderboard system to celebrate visionaries, and we'll keep this for next time, as it acknowledges the best of the best in a way that tiers couldn't do on their own. That is true. And also, you get a cool health bar to show off as well, which I think they should bring to TFT. All right, that was long. And just like making TFT, I couldn't have written this one alone. So a big thanks to the entire team that lent a hand into the Arcane in our Festival of Beasts Revival. And a big thanks to you for playing, providing feedback, and reading even right now. We'll have plenty to talk about in our next set in the coming future. From the future. And we hope that you'll see these learnings in action for sets to come. All right. Thank you, Riot. Thank you, Mort. Honestly, I think set 13 ended up being a pretty good set. I would say that it gets a minus from me. I know for Mort, it's probably like an S tier set because I think it's like his second or third favorite set. For me, I think it's high up there, but I don't think it's like the best. Maybe because it didn't do anything. It didn't change the game. And I think the S tier is like it changed the game and made me like re-fall in love with TFT, if that makes sense. Like I feel like I love TFT a lot. And this is a great it's good, but it didn't like make me it didn't do what set 6 did, for example. Like that was unbelievable. So I gave it like an A minus instead of like the S or whatever, but it seems pretty good. The balance was really good this set. I'm kind of surprised they didn't talk about I'm surprised they didn't glaze himself over balance. Balance was pretty good. The people that were saying that it's badly balanced because you couldn't play Heimer and Black Rose versus like other things, and that's not balance necessarily. That's more like just how that's just the rigidity of design, I think. I don't think that's a balance thing. But I think I understand that what they mean. It's sort of interlinked. Either way, overall, good stuff. Good stuff. Stopping by to say that Rotterdam was just talking to you on stream and he says you're beautiful. Oh damn. Game recognizes game.